Good evening. It is so wonderful to see all of you here. Good evening, students, faculty, staff, alumni, trustees, and distinguished guests from near and far. And it is truly my distinct privilege to welcome you to tonight's conversation with former Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, this year's Wilson Speaker. This year's Wilson Speaker and the most respected figure in the global environmental movement. My sincere thanks to Trustee Sue Wagner, who will serve as his partner as they make the case for hope, activism, and responsible stewardship of our planet. First, to our guests, we are so glad you could join us today. Wellesley, as the preeminent college for women, has for over 100 years championed women's intellectual and social development and leadership. Our students are renowned as some of the most talented, engaged, creative, and intelligent young women. They care deeply about a host of social and political issues, including the environment. Student groups include ENACT, Environmental Action at Wellesley College, the Eco-Reps, the Botanistas, and SCOOP, the community of students who practice sustainable living, including emotional sustainability. Students also take part in Wellesley's Regeneration Farm, which focuses on promoting sustainable agriculture. Wellesley's outstanding faculty study, publish, and teach about the environment from a wide range of perspectives: the social and political, the moral and philosophical, the scientific and psychological, the literary and the historical. I want to congratulate Beth DeSombri, professor and director of the Environmental Studies program, who just published Why Good People Do Bad Environmental Things. She is just... I know this audience is filled, though, with good people who do good things. She is just one of several faculty who are powerful contributors to the discourse surrounding these issues. Our alumni break barriers in every field, and Wellesley alumni have been major forces in some of the most prominent and far-reaching conservation efforts of the 20th century. Marjorie Stoneham Douglas, class of 1912, led the fight to save the Florida Everglades. Elizabeth Barlow Rogers, class of 1957, headed the Central Park Task Force that founded New York City's Central Park Conservancy. Alumni are also forging new paths, like Wendy Judge Paulson, class of 1969, whose generosity led to the vision and the founding of the innovative and unique Paulson Ecology of Place initiative right here at Wellesley just last year. Liz Ogbu, class of 98, is a creative genius in sustainable design who works with communities in need across the globe using her expertise to bring about social impact. And Caitlin Powers, class of 09, co-founder and CEO of One Earth Designs, is a top solar power innovator and researcher. Like so many Wellesley alumni, these leaders who span nearly a century embody Wellesley's motto, not to be ministered unto, but to minister. Tonight's event serves as a perfect capstone event to Wellesley's Year of Sustainability, a way to honor the progress we have made this year and to spur our community to accomplish even more. The Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability has provided strong leadership in promoting more sustainable behaviors and policies. The committee's greatest accomplishments have been in initiating a campus-wide conversation on sustainability, bringing a series of compelling speakers on campus, and encouraging academic integration with sustainability-related courses offered by nearly 20 departments. I'm grateful for the extraordinary work of the Advisory Committee led by Associate Professor Yui Suzuki. The college has adopted an ambitious sustainability plan for both reducing our carbon footprint by 2036 and for achieving carbon neutrality in the future. We are developing energy conservation measures for our buildings, and our new Science Center will be Gold LEED certified. We have strengthened the Office of Sustainability, and I recently announced to the community, following productive talks with ENACT, and that's Environmental Action at Wellesley, that the college is committing $300,000 per year for 10 years towards sustainability initiatives on campus. We absolutely have, thank you. Thank you. We absolutely have more work to do. We have so much more ahead of us, but I am so proud of all we've accomplished so far during not only this year, but over the past several years, and the teamwork and leadership exhibited by so many of our students, faculty, and staff. I know tonight will help us bring even more energy and excitement to our goals. There are few other contemporary issues that are as monumental in scope and as deeply connected to our future as the issue of climate change. Just a few weeks ago, the New York Times reported that United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres declared climate change the most systemic threat to humankind, above all other threats. Environmental justice must be central to the movement. All of us, no matter our gender, race, color, national origin, or income, deserve a stable environment and safe natural resources, including drinkable water and breathable air. Environmental laws must treat us all equally, affording all people the same access and the same protections, today and for generations to come. So on to the main event. The annual Wilson event is the college's premier academic lecture with a long tradition of bringing internationally prominent leaders to speak on critical contemporary issues. The lecture series was endowed by Carolyn A. Wilson, a journalist and war correspondent and a member of the Wellesley class of 1910. And she established this to ensure that future generations of Wellesley students would be familiar with the most important public figures and issues of the day. We are deeply honored to have Vice President Gore serve as this year's speaker. He is known across the globe for his lifetime of leadership and public service, including his tireless efforts to slow and stop the increasing threat of climate change. He is the co-recipient with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for informing the world about the dangers posed by climate change. Mr. Gore was inaugurated as vice president on January 20th, 1993, and served 8 years in the position. Previously, he was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives beginning in 1976 and of the U.S. Senate from 1984 until he became vice president. Vice President Gore is the author of several best-selling books, and of course, he is the subject of an Oscar-winning documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, and a follow-up film that premiered in July of 2017, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. Sue Wagner is a widely respected and trusted business leader, named one of the 50 most powerful women in business by Fortune magazine. And she is also a beloved alumna from the class of 1982, a trustee of the college, and a friend to so many here, including tonight's guest of honor. She is co-founder and director of BlackRock, now the world's largest asset manager, employing more than 11,000 people. She served as BlackRock's vice chairman and as a member of the global executive and operating committees before retiring in 2012. She also served as global executive sponsor of and as a director continues to support BlackRock's Women's Initiative Network and Women's Leadership Forum. Recently honored by the National Association of Corporate Directors, Ms. Wagner serves on the boards of Swiss Re and Color Genomics, in addition to the boards of Apple, BlackRock, and Wellesley College. It is truly an honor to have these two leaders with us this evening to help deepen our understanding of one of the most critical issues of our day. This will serve as a powerful reminder that the students on this campus and young people everywhere will lead the way. They understand, as I hope we all do, what author and conservationist and activist Terry Tempest Williams has said, and I quote, "The eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time." Please help me welcome Wellesley College trustee Sue Wagner and this year's Wilson Speaker, our most formidable voice in the fight against climate change, and our 45th Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Al, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to my alma mater.
Well, thank you very much, Sue, and I want to thank President Paula Johnson for the honor of being invited here. I want to thank you and all of the Board of Trustees for this event, and say thanks to the faculty and students. And let me acknowledge that I believe there are some members of the Climate Reality Project that have gone through the training. There they are. Okay, great. Thank you for being here.
So, I mean, look at this crowd. You have drawn a sold-out crowd, so we are obviously so excited to have you here. President Johnson, in her opening remarks, reminded us of the fact that you are well known for so many different things, but I'm not sure she remembered that, like someone else we know, you won a popular election for president and didn't win the Electoral College.
There is that.
You have also been recognized as an early and avid supporter of important innovations like the internet, and I just think you guys probably don't know, that's why they call it an algorithm. But seriously, this passion for the environment seems to have infused your work broadly for a long time.
Yeah.
From your books and the documentaries that Paula mentioned, to Generation Investment Management, to a Nobel Peace Prize, to the Climate Reality Project. And as you may know, may or may not know, the Annenberg School for Communication published a paper last year exploring how social movements reach their tipping point, that moment when a movement explodes and suddenly everybody is following it. And it occurred to me that you are the tipping point for the major global shift in awareness about climate change.
Well, that sets off my hubris alarm, but it's a little over the top.
I'm allowed to do that.
Thank you.
But I would like actually to start there. How did your dedication to the environment and climate change begin?
Well, my dedication to the issue of climate really began when I was the age of many of the students here. I was an undergraduate and walked into a course outside my field of concentration that was taught by one of the greatest climate scientists in all history, Roger Revelle, who chartered the first experiments to measure CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. When I was a young child, I learned from my parents, who were of the generation that were deeply concerned about soil erosion. Those who've studied about the Dust Bowl days and the soil erosion crisis. My father, when I followed him around our family farm, he had an eagle eye for anything that looked like it was going to become a gully, and taught me how to put stones and branches. And then Step two, when I was 13, my mother, who read aloud a lot to me in my childhood, but this was the first time I remember her reading aloud at the dinner table to my sister and me from Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. And those two experiences kind of primed me for the epiphany that I had when Roger Revelle outlined what the climate crisis was all about. It was commonly called global warming then. And I kept in touch with him over the years. When I got to the Congress in the fall of 1976 and asked what's going on with global warming, and nothing was going on, I got permission from one of my new committee chairs 2 years later to organize the first congressional hearing on climate change, and had my professor come and be the lead-off witness. And I naively thought that a 20-minute congressional statement would create the same epiphany for my colleagues on the dais that a full college course had. But after that didn't happen, that's really the first time I asked myself the question, how can this be communicated in a way that allows people like me to have that aha experience and see the reality of this? And that's really when this journey started. I never had any idea it would take over my life, but it's a privilege to have work like this that feels like it justifies pouring every ounce of energy I have into it.
So it's obviously led you on a long and winding path, finding the way to communicate it.
Yeah.
And you came to an inconvenient truth as well as an inconvenient sequel. And I'd like to ask what your observation is about what progress has been made since you did those two documentaries. What change have you seen, and what more do you think we need to do?
Well, that's a great question, Sue. In the 11 years between those two movies, there were two very big changes, one bad, one good. The first is that, unfortunately, the climate-related extreme weather events have become much more serious, much more frequent. Every night now on the television news is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation. Today, as we sit here, there are hundreds of thousands of acres on fire in Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas. I could go around the world and cite similar events. But last year in Houston, Texas, 5 feet of rain in 5 days, really extraordinary. And that was only one of the record-breaking hurricanes that caused $320 billion of damage last year. Anyway, I could go on with the list of these consequences, but they have become more severe. They are continuing to grow more severe. But the second change during that decade is a positive change. We have the solutions now. We really do. The cost reduction in electricity from solar and wind, the storage of electricity in batteries, the use of electricity in electric vehicles, and more important than all of that, efficiency improvements that don't get as much attention because there's not a single marquee technology. LEDs is close, but when you take them all together, I'm convinced the world is in the early stages of a sustainability revolution that has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. And it's empowered by the new digital tools of the Internet of Things and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And taken together, these new tools are giving executive teams the ability to manage electrons and atoms and molecules with the same precision that the IT companies have used in managing bits of information. One quick example, Google, Sue and I are partial to Apple, and but Google has the biggest server farms in the world, and they bought an artificial intelligence company called DeepMind, and they asked them to apply this technology to reducing energy use in their server farms. No change in hardware, increased output of processed information, but just with artificial intelligence, they reduced energy consumption by 56%. with precise management of the electrons and the BTUs. And there are thousands, if not millions, of use cases around the world where this is really beginning to happen. So my hope is that this one positive change will gain enough momentum to help us deal with the negative change, which is that the problem's getting worse.
You know, when I saw An Inconvenient Sequel with you, I got to see it in early screening, I thought it really captured the tension between developed and developing economies, and the drama of India in particular, resisting the imposition of caps and measurement, given that they are a developing country with 300 million people currently off the grid.
Yeah.
You know, in this country, lest we think it is only far away, in this country, environmental issues differ across the country as well, not only by geography, but by socioeconomic and other differences. And I'm wondering whether you think we can, and how we can, tackle environmental inequity at the same time we're tackling climate change.
Yeah, another great question. Really, if I could take it in two parts. India did a dramatic U-turn after the Paris Agreement. If you look at the new electricity generation additions that they installed the year before Paris, 65% were based on coal. A year after Paris, 65% were based on solar and wind. And they now have under construction and in the planning for construction to begin for 175 gigawatts. If you don't speak gigawatts, that's really a huge, huge amount. And they are accelerating their plans to speed up this shift over to renewable energy. And actually, I want to get to environmental justice and inequities in our own country, but if you look at the split between developed and developing countries, I have sometimes drawn an analogy to what happened with cell phones. When mobile phones became perfected, they had a lot of sales in the rich countries. But in the poor countries that did not have a landline telephone grid, the sales there really skyrocketed, way beyond what happened in the wealthy countries. In other words, they leapfrogged the old technology. Now, you just mentioned India has almost as many people with zero electricity as the entire population of the US, and they're leapfrogging to renewable energy. So in some ways, they have this advantage where they're not bogged down by the legacy technologies of the past. Now, in our own country, it's a little bit different, but I will be in Montgomery, Alabama tomorrow and the next day for the launch of the Environmental Justice Initiative and the opening of this new museum that commemorates lynching. It's a dramatic new exercise, but there is an awakening to the cost savings for low-income families that can come with the shift to solar, particularly rooftop solar. Now, some of the fossil fuel companies and fossil fuel burning utilities have used their legacy political and economic power to try in every way they can to slow down this transition. But now we're beginning to see grassroots pressure, not least from low-income families, to say, wait a minute, we want the lower cost electricity, and we want access to these new technologies. The burdens of environmental insults have, as most of you know, been disproportionately visited upon communities of color, low-income communities, communities that have less political and economic power to defend themselves. I heard a speaker a couple of weeks ago explain how the eastern side of American cities are always the ones more likely to have communities of color, and because they're downwind, and that's where the smoke plumes go. And enough already, because the health consequences are very obvious, and people are standing up and saying, no, no more. That's what this Environmental Justice Initiative is all about.
You know, the 2015 Paris Accord was a real moment of hope You talked a little bit about India and the U-turn they've made. And frankly, I really remember, not as well as you, I wasn't there, but reading it in the papers, the sense of joy and of hope when all of those nations came together and signed that accord. It calls, as you know, for the U.S. to cut its emissions between 26 and 28% below 2005 levels by 2025. But the current administration has announced its intention to pull out of the Paris Accord in 2020, which, a point that you've made a number of times, happens the day after the next election. Just keep that in mind. My question for you is, can we get there without a robust federal effort to address climate change?
We can get to the commitments we made for the Paris Agreement without leadership from the executive branch, yes, and we will. We're still legally in the agreement, as you noted, and in addition, if there's a new president, excuse me for a moment, then a new president could, nothing partisan about that, but a new president could give 30 days notice and we're right back in the agreement. That agreement, by the way, was quarterbacked by a woman, Christiana Figueres, who did an absolutely outstanding job. But here's the thing, for all the decades I've been involved in this issue, one way of defining the central political problem is that the maximum that has been politically feasible has always fallen well short of the minimum that would satisfy the laws of physics. So in that kind of situation, what do? You could curl up in a fetal position and feel despair, but that doesn't do much good. The other option is to work on strategies for expanding the limits of what is politically possible. And the world's been doing that for quite some time now. And the Paris Agreement was the biggest leap forward we've ever had. It's still not enough. And though we can meet and exceed the commitments we made there, we have to do much more. And the Paris Agreement also has two mandatory provisions. Most of it's voluntary, but information transparency and a requirement that every 5 years, all the countries that signed it have to have a thorough review of whether or not they can increase their commitments. And with the stunning continuing reduction in cost of renewable electricity and these other technologies that I've mentioned, it will be possible for every country to become more ambitious. So all of the investment bankers and the market analysts are now projecting the U.S. will exceed our commitments made in Paris, regardless of what President Trump does. Now, it's partly because California and New York and Washington and 15 other states have taken leadership positions, hundreds of cities, thousands of businesses, universities, and congratulations, Madam President, on the sustainability initiatives here at Wellesley. So leadership has been taken by others. Now, eventually, we're going to have changes in policy. The world still subsidizes fossil fuels at a rate 38 times greater than the meager subsidies for renewables. That's crazy, absolutely insane. We have to change that. We have to change a lot of the barriers that are slowing down the transition that we need to make. So yes, leadership is required. I think it'll be forthcoming. We're actually very close. It doesn't seem that way sometimes, but we're very close to a governing majority in the U.S. Congress on this issue. Twice we've come within one vote. Twice we've had major climate legislation that passed the House and came within one vote in the Senate. And we could have passed it perhaps in early 2009 if the focus hadn't been totally on health care. But since then, some Republicans have shifted, thank goodness, and more candidates are being elected pledged to this issue. And let me just take a moment to say, I'm here because I'm invited, and it's a great honor, but I'm here not just to give you information. I'm here to recruit you. And I hope that all of you who are old enough are already registered to vote. I'm not telling you what party to gravitate to, but every great morally based revolution that has advanced the cause of humankind has been led in significant measure by young people and students, college students and high school students. I didn't know until I heard you, President Johnson, tell me that Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was a graduate of Wellesley. And of course, her name has been much in the news, and the students of that high school have been so inspiring. That's your generation. I'm speaking to the students now, of course. And I mean, you can make all of the difference, and I'm pretty excited about the years ahead.
So I'm going to stay right on that topic and ask you to give a little bit more guidance to all of us in the room, and especially the students. You know, what can we do to make people feel the urgency of climate change and combat the increasing voices of climate change deniers? And how do we sustain the momentum once people are recruited to your cause, to our cause?
We are making progress. The poll numbers are inching up. 2/3 roughly of the American people are on side. There is a hardcore of this denier group. That's about 15%. But we're the only country in the world that has these persistent levels of climate denial. In my home state of Tennessee, there's an old saying among the farmers that if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you can be pretty sure it didn't get there by itself. And when you see these persistently high levels of climate denial, similarly, you can be certain it didn't happen on its own. There has been an organized effort. It's a deeply unethical and immoral effort. It's been documented thoroughly. Pulitzer Prizes have been won. By the way, congratulations on the new Pulitzer Prize for your faculty in poetry here at Wellesley. Wow. But previous Pulitzer Prize winners have documented this story of how many, not all, of the fossil fuel carbon polluters and utilities that burn fossil fuels took a page out of the tobacco industry's playbook. And many of you know years ago, after the Surgeon General's report mid-century stated the clear scientific consensus linking cigarette smoking to lung and heart diseases, the tobacco companies hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them in front of cameras to say, "Hi, I'm a doctor, and you don't have to worry at all about health problems related to cigarettes." So you can Google these old ads on the internet now. They're illegal now, of course. But the carbon polluters have used that same technique, and they have funneled enormous amounts of money into maintaining this climate denial. Now, what can you do about it? Well, if you run into a climate denier, and I know many of you do, the uncle at Thanksgiving is not just a hypothetical issue for some of you. You know, listen carefully and politely and respectfully and try to identify where he's going wrong. If it becomes obvious that it's covered with a hard shell and you're not going to be able to break through, then go to the next person at the table. But learn as much as you can about it. Be fearless, be kind, but be persistent. Make the changes in your own lives, and that will give you more staying power. But this is the challenge of our time, and we need you to be deeply involved. And we need you to vote. It's important to change the light bulbs and the windows. It's way more important to change the laws and the policies, and that's what we need, and elections are the way to do that.
So I have a long list of questions for you, but I'm going to ask one last one before we turn it to the audience. When you think about the future, what aspect of climate change worries you the most?
You know, there were two studies a couple of weeks ago tending to confirm one of the issues I raised in my first movie, the slowing of the Gulf Stream. And after that first movie, they said, well, we're not sure, we need to do some more testing. So I kind of backed off that just a little bit. But now they've done the studies and they're back deeply concerned about that. This will take just a moment, but a scientist a long time ago told me that if you look at the climate system as a whole, you take the entire globe, the equator, the climate system is an engine for transferring heat from the tropics to the poles through ocean currents and wind currents and complex systems like El Nino and many others not as well known. And one of the things that happens, Sue, is that the melting of ice in the Arctic radically changes the amount of heat from the sun that's absorbed in the Arctic. Instead of the sun's rays bouncing off 90%, they're absorbed 90% after the ice melts by the ocean and the land. And so the Arctic heats up twice as fast and the temperature differential changes. So this complex system, this engine, adopts a new pattern. It has to. And the pattern we've enjoyed since the end of the last ice age, 10, 11,000 years ago, that's when the first cities were built. That's when agriculture began. Everything that has led to the flourishing of humankind has taken place within this benign climate equilibrium that we've always known. What is most dangerous is that we could radically change that equilibrium. We're already seeing changes in the amount of rain that falls at the same time, how quickly the droughts take hold and how long they last, how quickly the seas are rising because of the melting ice, movement of tropical diseases to the higher latitudes, political instabilities, climate refugees, and many other consequences, the sixth great extinction. But if we lost this climate equilibrium, then the places where it rained at all would change. The temperatures that we have come to rely on would no longer be the reality that we face. Places where we could go grow food could change. So what worries me the most is big, unforeseen, nonlinear changes. We saw that in the past with the stratospheric ozone hole, a related issue, different but related. We have to be prepared for some unwelcome surprises that could be quite dangerous indeed. Now, again, I'm an optimist, but that optimism is based on the assumption that you guys, having been recruited, are going to get out there and help push this across the political tipping point where people in both political parties and independents as well have the kind of consensus that every other country in the world has. I think we can do it as Americans, and I think you can make all the difference in making that happen.
As I turn to the audience, I want to note that in one of your books, you talk about the 6 drivers of global change, and one of those drivers focuses on the education of girls, and we couldn't agree more. I want to start, before I turn to the audience, to thank the leaders of ENACT, especially event chair Jessica Ostfeld, Wellesley class of 2020, who spearheaded Jessica spearheaded an effort to solicit questions from the entire student body.
Oh, wow.
But we're not going to ask all of them. After collecting those questions, and there were many wonderful ones, as you might expect from Wellesley women, the students were then asked to vote, it was practice for voting, to select which would be asked here tonight. And so the students who were selected are sitting right here in the front row, and I'm going to turn to them now and ask them to ask their questions. So our first comes from Samantha Hung, class of 2019. Samantha, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Samantha. Thank you, Mr. Gore, for coming to Wellesley and speaking with us. My question for you is, what kind of education, skills, or experiences do you think the younger generations need to be future leaders in combating climate change?
Well, it's a great question, Samantha, and there's not a single answer, because one answer would be to equip yourselves with the scientific knowledge or the technological training to help craft the solutions that we need to perfect. But I would offer a slightly different answer. I think one of the things that's most important is an ability to be in a healthy relationship with nature. I think underneath a lot of this climate crisis is a reality for many people where they assume they're somehow separate from nature and that we can just dominate and exploit without regard to the fact that we are part and parcel of the earth itself. So I point toward the humanities and toward courses of instruction that actually do emphasize connection to nature. And I read some of the materials that accompany your year of sustainability that include professors taking students out into nature and experiencing this reality. So I think that's awfully important. But I'll finish with one story from my youth. When I was 13, I was inspired by President John F. Kennedy's goal of putting a person on the moon, bringing him back safely in 10 years. I was so excited. But my parents' generation, I heard many of them say, oh, it's going to be a waste of money. Probably fail, that's a terrible idea. But 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And there was a great cheer that went up in Houston, Texas at NASA's Mission Control. And the average age of the systems engineers at Mission Control was 26, which means, among other things, their average age when they heard that challenge was 18. And they decided to get the skills and the knowledge that would equip them to be a part of reaching that goal. Today's great challenge is to solve the climate crisis. You yourself are best able to judge what skills would best equip you to be a part of that if you choose to do so. But we need you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Paige Anderson, Wellesley class of 2020. Paige?
Mr. Gore, thank you for speaking at Wellesley. I remember when I was little, my mom, who considers herself to be a Republican, would not believe in global warming and would joke about the polar bears on the slabs of ice in your documentary. However, she likes being, in her words, a steward of the environment. With politics and labels being so polarized today, how can we reach out to people on the other side of the aisle who don't believe in climate change and who don't see it as an immediate problem in their lives, to instead see the inevitable danger behind climate change? How can we get beyond the labels of conservative and liberal to instead talk about an issue which affects all of us? Thank you.
Yeah, another great question. I see why you guys had your questions voted up. I spoke to this briefly in a way a moment ago about listening carefully and trying to identify the part of the issue where they're going wrong. But I would also add this, that many people who are in the denier camp, or who feel like they should be in the denier camp because their political tribe, if you will, says that's a badging exercise, if you know what I mean. They're beginning to notice that there's a new participant in this debate, Mother Nature, And it is a little difficult to ignore things like Superstorm Sandy, things like Hurricane Harvey and Irma and Maria and the fires and all of the other things that are going on every day now. And what I have found is that some people are willing to listen and begin to change if you use a different vocabulary and ask, don't you think this weather is getting pretty extreme, just like last year and the year before? And 17 of the 18 hottest years ever measured with instruments have been since 2001. And by the way, it's continuing. And some of those who still resist this conclusion now, a few years from now, it's going to be even more obvious. So if you can find a way to leverage what people really are noticing about this strange extreme weather, I think that helps. Finally, the fact that these alternative technologies like renewable energy are getting so cheap, that makes it easier. At a time when the alternatives seem like they weren't available, that made it easier for them to stay deniers. I became really good friends with a conservative, Republican, Trump-supporting mayor of a city called Georgetown, Texas, in the heart of oil country. And I told this story in my latest movie. But he happens to be a certified public accountant, and he's really good with numbers. And he noticed that the citizens of his city could save money if they switched to wind and solar. And so he did. And now their electricity bills have gone way down, and helping to save the future of humanity is kind of a side benefit. For another quick example, there's a famous coal museum in Kentucky, and they just install solar panels all over their roof. So even those who don't want to give up the denier language have other ways to find this issue accessible and to become part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Okay, next up is Gabby Varela, again, Wellesley class of 2020. Gabby, do you want to get up and ask your question?
Hi, so thank you again for coming. This is something y'all already touched upon a little bit, but my question is, how can conversations around sustainability and environmental concern happen through an intersectional lens? And the reason I ask this is because the consequences of climate change impact poor communities of color the most, and like not all policies and solutions are like necessarily take that in consideration. So like an example I'm thinking about is like when you say, oh, just buy and like eat organically, and that's not accessible to low income communities or people living in food deserts. And it's not just accessibility to food, but also like the knowledge.
Right.
So that's kind of, because like I know you did say like that the grassroots organizers are kind of in the front lines of this, but like how do you get that translated into policies that will be implemented?
Yeah, and you could say the same thing about the cost of solar panels coming down, but it's still less accessible to low-income families, hybrid cars and electric cars. So it's a great question. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the last years of his life, started the Poor People's Campaign and decried what he called the three evils, racism, poverty, and militarism. There is a new Poor People's Campaign led by Reverend William Barber from North Carolina, he's an amazing preacher, and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, they're the two co-chairs. And they have added a fourth evil, racism, poverty, militarism, and ecological destruction. And the fact that these environmental insults and harms are way more likely to cause harm to people of color and people of minority communities of various kinds and low-income communities is now a reality that people are waking up to. I co-authored the first environmental justice bill in the Congress with Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, and we weren't able to pass it, but when the Clinton-Gore administration came in, we had an executive order, and That's the one they haven't eliminated. I shouldn't mention it in public. But I do think that the intersectional approach is now spreading into the questions of ecological destruction and climate. But you're so right to focus on that. We need everybody, we need all the voices, and we need everybody's energy and strength. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby. Well, I'm getting the hook over here. I know we're running a little short on time, but we have two fantastic questions still to ask, and I really would like to get to both of them.
Sure.
So I ask everyone to be a little patient. Next, we're going to turn to Kristen Gasparini, also Wellesley Class of 2020. Wellesley Class of 2020 is clearly on it.
Thank you. So I'd like to connect this last question, second to last question, to the four evils that you just mentioned, and which all seem to stem from something called capitalism. And so the next question is, the biggest obstacle to environmental healing is the power of corporations, finance, and the affiliated political interests that have no incentive to move towards a different economic system, nor the internalization of environmental costs. What is your plan for tackling the problem at this very root? Does it even make sense to talk about change without talking about money power?
Oh, wow, great question.
I said, I promise.
You know, Sue's become one of my closest friends on the Apple board, and we actually talk about this question on a regular basis. Oh, I've got so many things I want to say in response, and I got to keep it so short so we can get to this last question. Capitalism in its current form does contribute to this problem significantly because of the short-term focus on quarterly profits and a focus on a very tiny spectrum, of portion of the value spectrum. I could talk all day about this. I'm trying to compress this. One thing I want to say to you is the alternatives to capitalism, the most prominent ones were tested out in the 20th century. They didn't work very well. And one of the problems was they had the worst environmental catastrophes ever in the former Soviet Union, for example. And a command and control system, I don't think is an answer. But I want to agree with you that capitalism, as it's currently formed, short-term focus, based on a very distorted way of deciding what's valuable. You know, there's an old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem begins to look like a nail. If the only tool you have for measuring what's valuable is a price tag, then those things that don't have a price tag can begin to look like they have no value. And so externalities is a word from economics that basically means you don't have to worry about it. It's safe to ignore it. What is an externality? Pollution, clean air, clean water, clean soil with healthy food. We need to internalize these values that have been arbitrarily excluded. Now, I actually work on this a lot. In addition to the Climate Reality Project, as Sue mentioned early on, or I think President Johnson did, I chair and co-founded a firm that focuses on changing the investment world to promote sustainable capitalism with a new approach. We're making some progress. Sue's firm, just the chairman of her firm, Larry Fink, just put out one of the most amazing letters articulating really clearly and eloquently the kind of values that I think you would really resonate with. Putting that into practice is a challenge that many of us are undertaking in the financial world. It is a growing movement. Sustainable capitalism has to be a part of the solution. By the way, we also need sustainable democracy. Capitalism and democracy are the two most important tools for bringing good changes. Our democracy was hacked before Vladimir Putin hacked it by big money and lobbyists. We have to reform capitalism and we have to restore American democracy.
Our last question comes from event chair Jessica Ostfeld, also Wellesley class of 2020.
So first, I would like to address my peers. I added a little bit of background since I initially wrote it, so it may seem a little bit different. So just wanted to give you a heads up. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. And now here's my question. In 2016, the Wellesley College Board of Trustees approved a campus-wide sustainability plan. The primary goals of the plan include a reduction in, and I quote, greenhouse gas emissions from on-campus activities by 37% by 2026 and by 44% by 2036 from a 2010 baseline, and to undertake long-term planning to achieve carbon neutrality. In the pursuit of these environmental sustainability goals, Wellesley must also consider economic sustainability. For instance, many of us know that our aged power plant is in need of replacement. Replacement plans are being prepared, incorporating varying levels of traditional and renewable energy sources. Renew Wellesley, a group of students under an act, including myself, I'm repping the PIN, is pushing for the most sustainable plan possible and for Wellesley to move to 100% renewable energy by 2040. However, this may not be the most economically feasible option at this time. What could the leadership at a small liberal arts college like Wellesley do to accomplish and expand its sustainability goals and help mitigate the effects of climate change while keeping in mind the economic realities?
Well, I'm always in favor of doing more quickly, but I also have a deep respect for the fact that your administration here and your board of trustees has to look at a lot of factors that I don't really know that much about, where the particulars of Wellesley are concerned. I would say this, that many of the mainstream economists and mainstream analysts have consistently underestimated the speed with which the cost of renewable electricity is coming down. They've consistently underestimated, I'm not talking about your administration, I'm talking about the analysts worldwide, including the international energy agencies, they're supposed to be the real authorities. Every year they look at what's happened and they say, wow, we didn't expect that. Well, maybe some of you who are students and who are really invested and part of this issue could help to uncover some of the facts about what the alternatives might look like, how they're potentially more feasible than these mainstream analysts tell everybody all the time. So I would urge you to try to dig deep for the facts about how these alternatives could be more available sooner than most of the consultants are telling universities now. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
So that is just a small sampling of the incredible questions that were submitted by our students, and I want to thank our 5 students for those great questions. Unfortunately, our short time together is just about up. I would like to close by going back to my observation at the very beginning about you being the tipping point. In some ways, people seem more energized than ever about addressing environmental issues and sustainability. And one example I wanted to highlight is America's Promise and the We're Still In It letter. I don't know if you all know about that, I'm sure you do. Wellesley College and more than 2,700 cities, states, and organizations across all 50 states, representing nearly 160 million people and 6.2 trillion in GDP, which makes this group of people equal to the 3rd largest country behind only China and the US as a whole, signed a letter agreeing to deliver on the US goals in the Paris Agreement, whether the federal government signs on or not. The collective commitment and energy that that represents is incredible, and in my view, is a direct byproduct of your passion and a legacy for which we are all grateful. Please join me in thanking Vice President Gore for his tireless efforts.
Thank you very much.